As you plan to destroy property, know that the government will protect life and property tomorrow in Nairobi and in other towns.
Na bibi pia nataka kutoa wito kwa Sakaja, na yeye pia atoe order yake aban maandamano kule Nairobi. Ndio maana sasa kama maandamano itakuwa ikuwe huko Kisumu.
Na serikali ikiwa imekashifiwa kwa kukosa kulinda shamba la Northlands linalohusishwa na familia ya Rais mstaafu Uhuru Kenyatta lilipovamiwa na watu wasiojulikana. Naibu Rais alionekana kutegua kitendawili.
The government has a constitutional mandate to protect life and property of the rich and the powerful.
Nani alishinda? Sasa mimi nataka nimwambie mtu wa kitendawili, please, wewe ni mzee, tungependa sana tukeheshimu, lakini wacha fujo, wacha maandamano, wacha vita, wacha kupiganisha watu. Tafadhali, we want to respect everybody. Lakini mambo ya fujo na maandamano na kupiganisha watu na kuharibu mali ni mambo ambayo hayakubaliki katika society yeyote tukiendekea mbele. Na hata kama mzee ya kitendawili ako na shida ya mama mboga ya nini? Makanga ako na shida ilitokea wapi? Wafanyabiashara bodaboda wako na shida na yeye ilitokea wapi? Kwani mimi nauliza nyinyi watu wa Kisii, ule mtu ya kitendawili alishindana na nyinyi ama alishindana na mimi? Si alishindana na mimi. Kama ako na shida, si akuje aniulize. Sasa ameenda kuletea fujo, ameenda kuletea vita. Mama mboga hajauza kwa sababu ya vita yake. Ule makanga hajakuwa kazini kwa sababu.
Equally, the same government has an obligation to protect the life and property of ordinary Kenyans. Property being destroyed and the instigation of the rich and the powerful. The government will protect both the rich and the powerful.
Tuko na seneta moja pale, seneta anaitwa Sifuna. Aliambia watu Kisumu, mkiona chakula mwende mkuu. Mwingine akafunga mbuzi zake kwa barabara. Kwa hivyo akafuata Sifuna, wakavamia mali, wakambemba kondoo ya wenyewe. Kwa hivyo Azimio ndio wanafaa kujibu wale watu walikuwa kule, walitoka wapi na walitumwa na nani.
Viongozi hao wa Kenya Kwanza wakisema Azimio ilikuwa inatumia dhana kuwa wanapigania wa Kenya kuhusu gharama ya maisha, ilhali walikuwa wanasaka nafasi serikalini kupitia mlango wa nyuma.
He is trying to blackmail us into talks. I want to confirm to the people of Kenya that the government shall not give in to blackmail. And nobody will come to power through violence.
Tafadhali kanisa, kama mko na haja na nchi hii, muongee na Raila kivyake ndio mjue ni nini. Kwa sababu kama ni maisha kuwa juu, maisha iko juu kila mahali dunia safari hii.
Lakini sisi kule Rift Valley ndio maamua kupanda mahindi ili bei ya unga ikuje chini.
Kando na hayo, kiongozi wa wengi bungeni Kimani Ichung'wah aliyekashifiwa kuhusu uvamizi wa shamba la familia ya Kenyatta pia alipata utetezi.
Nimeona wanataka kuingilia kiongozi wetu Kimani Ichung'wah ndiye Nyoro. Mimi wamenizoea. Na mimi hakuna pahali wanaweza kunipeleka. Mimi am not even there. And if they want to know who we are, waulize Uhuru Kenyatta, anatujua vizuri. Anatujua. You know, they tried to fight us when he was president, it was not possible. I don't know how you can fight us when you're out of government.
Kauli mbiu ya Rigathi ikiwa kwamba kulikuwa na njama ya kuhakikisha eneo la Mlima Kenya linasalia bila kiongozi shupavu, akimlaumu Rais mstaafu Uhuru Kenyatta kwa kutojali jamii ya Mlima Kenya. Chemutai Goindu ni...
I've just told him that in Siaya, we started this journey long time ago. I remember when I came to office in 2015, when I was starting the party called MDG, ukaniuliza, utaweza kweli kushinda kura zidi ya Raila? Kumwambia wacha nini jaribu. Now I've won twice in my own party. So, nataka kuambia watu wa Nyanza kwamba hii safari tutaenda pamoja. Sisi wote tutaenda pamoja hii safari. Hakuna mtu atabaki nyuma kwa sababu huyu muungwana amefanya kazi kubwa sana. Mr. President, the job you've done that no one may appreciate in this country is not to build roads, not to lower cost of living. is to make sure that this country is united. Because we can't grow if you're not united. Hii mnasema yote stima, barabara, nini, cannot happen if you're not united. Rais tangu achaguliwe ameenda kila mahali. Hakuna mahali mabagua hata mahali moja hajabagua. Go on that, Mr. President, unite us. Number 2, na nimesema jana nikiwa Ugenya kwamba saa hizi mvua inanyesha. It's raining now. We've been praying for rain. When the rain comes, you don't put on gum boots to go to the streets. When the rain comes, you get your jembes and go to the shamba. Sawa sawa?
Huku wakazi wa jiji la Kisumu wakijiandaa kwa maandamano ya siku ya Alhamisi, gavana wa Kisumu Profesa Anyang' Nyong'o amepiga marufuku kwa muda usiojulikana maandamano hayo katika jiji la Kisumu. Kupitia ujumbe wa Nyong'o kwa vyombo vya habari, anasema na watangazia kusitishwa kwa muda usiojulikana maandamano katika kaunti ya Kisumu kuanzia leo Jumatano tarehe 29 ili kutupa muda kujiunga na maandamano jijini Nairobi. Nyong'o anaendelea kusema kwamba watu wa Kisumu wanasalia kujitolea kwa matamanio ya muungano wa Azimio la Umoja na kampeni yake ya Kenya Bora. Japo Nyong'o katika ujumbe huo hakutaja sababu mahususi za kuchukua hatua hiyo, huenda hasara kubwa kwa jamii ya wafanyabiashara katika jiji hili kufuatia maandamano ya Jumatatu 2 zilizopita ikawa sababu kuu. Watu wawili walifariki wakati wa machafuko hayo. Mmoja aliuawa kwa kupigwa risasi na mwingine akauawa akijaribu kuiba simu ya rununu. Hoteli ya Imperial Sarova, maduka na baa ya Pit Stop jijini Kisumu ni baadhi ya vituo vya kibiashara ambavyo viliharibiwa zaidi, huku mali ya thamani ya mamilioni ya pesa ikiharibiwa. Ibainike wazi kuwa tarehe 23 mwezi huu akiwa Uingereza, Gavana Nyong'o, waziri wa biashara na uwekezaji Moses Kuria na shirika la United Green la Uingereza walitia kandarasi mkataba wa bilioni 31 kuimarisha sekta ya kilimo katika kaunti hii. Akimjibu Nyong'o, gavana wa Nairobi Johnson Sakaja amesema kwamba kaunti ya Nairobi ni kitovu cha biashara nchini na tayari wamekadiria hasara kubwa ya machafuko ya maandamano hayo kwa siku 2. Hivyo kwa heshima ya ugatuzi amemshauri gavana Nyong'o kuyaacha maandamano hayo kufanyika katika kaunti yake ya Kisumu. Na jijini Kisumu, uamuzi wa Nyong'o umeonekana kuwaghadhabisha wenyeji wanaomtaka kukoma kukandamiza ajenda ya mabadiliko yanayoongozwa na kinara wa upinzani Raila Odinga.
Hii maneno nyingine tunasema maandamano imeisha kabla tutasikia kwa Raila. Sasa tutaelewa nani? Tuelewe Raila ama tuelewe nani? Na tunajua kwa kinagaubaga wewe ulipata yako. Mwenye hajapata yake ni Raila Amolo Odinga. Tunakuomba governor, uachana na maneno ya baba. Ikiwa kazi imekushinda, kwenda nyumbani. Bei ya unga bado haijasuka chini. Sava yenyewe bado haijafunguliwa. Na sasa hii wewe unasema ati maandamano kuna Kisumu. Kwani hii Kisumu kwa sio Kenya? Bwana gavana, hii Kisumu sio Kenya. Kama umechoka na maandamano, gavana, tunakuheshimu, wewe ni mtu mkubwa, wewe ni mtu mzima. Wewe kaa tu nyumbani, wewe kaa tu pole pole. Wewe angalia tu venye sisi tunafanya maandamano.
Iwapo maandamano hayo yataandaliwa jijini Kisumu au la, ni muda tu utakaotoa majibu. Bramwell Bwire, KTN News, Kisumu.
Haya mtazamaji, habari ndio hiyo kama tulivyosema katika utangulizi wetu kwamba Gavana Nyong'o ameruhusu maandamano yaendelee kama ilivyokuwa imeratibiwa kinyume na taarifa aliyotoa.
wamefunga barabara hiyo kutatiza shughuli za usafiri. Ukiangalia ni mawe pale, mrundo wa mawe kwa umepangwa pale barabarani kuhakikisha kwamba hakuna anayetoka Kenya kuelekea Tanzania hatapita na hakuna anayetoka Tanzania kuelekea Kenya hatapita. Tuwasikize wanasemaje kwa sasa.
The people of Migori, we have decided to pick it today and to demonstrate because it's our right to demonstrate. We want to tell Koome, please let us.
Huku zikiwa zimesalia saa chache
and the African Union as well. And while doing so, we urged them that not merely in terms to ask for the dialogue, but also to insist that the state must adhere to the rule of law, including to the basic principles and guidelines that have been adopted within the region as well as internationally on the use of force by law enforcement agencies, on the principles that govern how order is managed during protests. All of these are critical, so that constantly, as we're having this conversation, we must have our eyes on these two things. There's a political dialogue that must take place, but while that is happening, we cannot push the rule of law to the back burner. These two things must work hand in hand. And I think as the diplomats, therefore, begin to take positions to speak to the various actors, this is very much welcome. I think all that we would urge them as civil society, as a commission of jurists and other actors, is to ensure that at the same time we're holding state authorities accountable to being adherent to the rule of law.
And make their way through that particular neighborhood. Stephen Leto, hopefully your signal stabilizes, but let us know what's going on now. All right, we are going to link up with him once again, but this is a vehicle, our vehicle, that is following the Azimio convoy. This was after they were interrupted in their flow through pipeline, had to find an alternative route. Police had used tear gas to disperse the protesters. We're seeing a bit of running. We don't know if that is as a result of police presence up ahead, possibly. So I believe Stephen Leto is back online. Let us know what's happening. We're seeing some new developments. Stephen? Stephen Leto, I hope you can hear me. We want to get an update on what we're seeing now. Quite a bit of action and movement from the protesters. Okay, we appear to have an issue linking up with him, but we'll get back to the team on the ground once they're able to establish a more stable connection with us here in studio. But live footage, at least, from the Citizen TV vehicle that is following the convoy, the Azimio convoy, as they try to find another alternative route. It's picked up a bit more of momentum compared to what we saw a bit earlier on. And you can see some smoke in the air, whether that is tear gas or not. Nope, that appears to be the water cannons in action. And trying to get the crowd away from that particular area. So we are waiting for an update from Stephen Leto as we try to deduce what exactly is going on, but they seem to have at least made their way out of the residential area in Pipeline to the main highway. At least they're making their way to the main highway from what we can see. And this again is the Azimio convoy. We are still following there, the water cannon truck rather, that was just passed by our team. They are now on the main road. Stephen Leto, I hope you can hear me now. Let us know what's going on, and hopefully you have a bit more information on where the convoy is headed.
Well, Victoria, like I told you, we've accessed the outer ring road, the terminal section, and right now we've been able to penetrate, but there have been a number of water cannons who try to repulse the other protesters who also reconvene back to the pipeline area. And now we are the outer ring road going, I think, to Mombasa Road, if I'm not wrong, because this is the direction that the convoy is taking. We have just, taken a U-turn after that confrontation with police officers, and we had to take a turn towards the pipeline, and we are following to see the vehicles where they are headed to, but a number of vehicles have been destroyed, including the vehicle being used by the Azimio One Kenya leader Raila Odinga. We've seen one of its right windows hit. But Victoria, I'm seeing we are taking a different turn, the turn that goes to Utawala section. It appears that the Azimio team is not done yet, because the turn that we've taken, we are going back to Outer Ring Road. We've taken the U-turn that is at the side of the airport, and we are now going, trying to see whether we are going to, up. I can see we are going to the right. This means we are going to the Utawala side, because already police have, blocked the entire, the entire Outer Ring Road. So there is no access of the protesters to the Outer Ring Road all the way to Thika Road or the side of Embakasi. Remember, the procession had been planned that after the Mukuru Kwanjenga and pipeline, that is in Embakasi South constituency, then the procession heads all the way to Embakasi East constituency, crisscrossing the sides of Donholm, the sides of Manyanja Road, and later, concluding the day in Jacaranda grounds, where I understand that there was a lot of police presence there. But again, it appears now it's back to plan zero, because the accessing of Embakasi can also be done using the sides of Utawala, and that is where exactly we are headed. We are almost at the at the roundabout that leads us to the military base. So we don't know whether we will take the left or we will continue straight past Utawala. And so, Vicky, like I've told you, it appears that the demonstration and the Azimio leaders are not done yet for the day. Because instead of taking Mombasa Road back to their headquarters, they are now going a bit inside the Eastlands area, and so that is what we know as of now. The vehicles are slowing down as they get stuck. A few trucks on the way are being cleared by some of the orderlies, and it appears they will eventually access Embakasi East constituency from the Utawala side. Victoria.
All right, Stephen Leto there, still with the Azimio convoy. They've already made their way out of pipeline. They're heading.
Made life impossible, confused our president, and made all projects to stall. 2022, we defeated him. He went to court. The Supreme Court made a decision. Again, now he's back. He has brought violence. He has brought destruction of property.
Kabila zote za Kenya wako Kibra. Hakuna chochote ambayo hayuko Kibra. Mimi nimekuwa mbunge.
Duties and the whole discourse on public order is that the security arms are supposed to protect that peaceful protest. So they're supposed to actually do a facilitative role, whereby to allow people to actually be able to present their petitions to whichever entity it is. And we are seeing that if you enact or even pass legislation that is drawing back on that legitimate constitutional principle, then there are going to be challenges, because right now we are speaking about these Azimio protests, but every entity, every person has a right to protest. It could be about employment law, it could be about climate justice, it could be about issues that are completely different from what we are seeing now. So we need to guard this space jealously, because through protests we are able to agitate for change and draw out issues that are currently happening in our country. So we see the potential clawback on gains, and we also see the challenges that Kenyans are going through, because now the discussion is around how do we balance the right to property, the right to peaceful assembly. Ideally, that's a state function. In the duty to facilitate and protect, the state ought to provide protection for individual persons who want to go about their business, to the property of persons and public entities. So we see that there is a lapse in the National Police Service, and indeed, that lapse cannot then be translated to the organizers of the demonstrations. It cannot be that case.
Aha. Do you agree, Joshua, that this falls squarely within the mandate of the National Police Service? Because Julie is asking, how do we balance the right to peacefully protest and the right to property? Is it, where does the responsibility lie? Because the Interior Ministry says some of that responsibility, and I'll pull up that statement, and they've made reference to some sections of the Public Order Act. The Interior Ministry says this falls partly in the court, the ball falls partly in the court of those who have organized the protests. What's your position?
The Constitution of Kenya 2010, as my colleague Julia said, rightfully, that Article 37 provides for the freedom and the right to picket, demonstrate. But it has some conditions. There is some level of responsibility that you be peaceful and unarmed. Not to carry weapons, not to carry any objects that can be used to injure others. Not the way we are seeing now, where people are carrying stones and they are carrying sticks and all that. That is not what the Constitution is talking about. And the moment you violate, the peacefulness, the practice of violence, the way we've seen on the 20th, last week on Thursday, and even on Monday, and then even today, the way we've just seen, it injures other rights that is provided for in the Constitution. And I want to quote Article 26 of the Constitution, which provides for the right to life, protects lives of Kenyans. But out of this, we've seen Kenyans losing lives. We saw a student in Maseno University who lost his life as a result of this. We saw a mechanic in Toy Market. Today, we've also seen a loss of lives. And that is the moment when we can say now, this need not to continue because Kenyans are losing lives. And of course, there is the other bit that there is freedom and security of every person in our country. Because there are people who are not involved in this demonstration. They are going on about their lives. They are in their shops. They are walking to their offices. Or probably the police officers also who have the dutiful role to protect the protesters and any other person within the environment of where protests are occurring. Even their lives are also protected by the Constitution. But the moment there is a risk where there is violence, the way we saw in Kibra, the way there was an attack and stealing of property in a private farm along Thika Road, that is the moment now when we can say now it stops being right and the right thing has to be done. And the right thing that has to be done there is the safeguarding, because the Constitution also gives power to say, in as much as you have this right, this has occurred as a result of the violation of this right, and other rights are also being denied on other people, such as loss of life, property, and even destruction of economic livelihoods of other people. That is my position.
All right, Julie, there's something you said in your statement, and I've pulled it up here, and you made reference to 2007.
Yes.
Why did you find it necessary to bring that back to the fore of our minds?
I think one thing that anyone who was alive and I would say of an adult age and could comprehend what was happening in 2007 is cognizant of is that a lot of the issues that then led to the violence were similar to what we are seeing now: incitement, ethnic profiling, hate speech, a sense of division within the country that can be clear. We are seeing people calling on others, yet we are all Kenyans. There are no others in this Kenya. We are all one Kenya. So we are seeing politicians inciting Kenyans to align to fractions and not listen to one another. And even the call for disenfranchisement of certain persons' private property, that is incitement in itself. It's actually borderlines on hate speech. And we are seeing all these are mirrored and reflect what happened in 2007. It started small. It started building. Kiosks were vandalized. People were hurt. People went to the streets and were tear gassed. Protests began. The issues were not resolved. We led to more protests. And before you know it, we have spiraled into a situation of anarchy. So why we want to draw this particular connection is that if we do not really look at the issues that are happening right now and the potential that they have for great destruction of property, of loss of life, of serious injury, social fabric derogation, we will completely actually be surprised when the country is completely in anarchy. And if you look at even the genocide that happened in Rwanda, it started very small. And then in one day, it escalated and 80,000 people died. These are not actually issues of only Kenya. Across the country, we see that, across the Africa, we see that small incitement, minor issues that are taken out of context, people who are not allowed to exercise their fundamental freedoms find opportunities to ventilate in a manner that is not adherence to the Constitution and also take to complete anarchy and disregard for rule of law. So I think this is time, and I'm glad that a lot of institutions are speaking out against it right now. Amnesty International issued a statement, the Kenya National Human Rights Commission issued a statement, NCIC have issued numerous statements calling for unity and peace. The religious communities have actually called for peace and dialogue. It's because we have lived experience around what this issue could completely go into. So I think to our political leaders, this is not really the time, this is not the tone that we should take to agitate for reform within the various issues. I think indeed there are some legitimate claims being made on both sides, and as ICJ we are apolitical because we are not partisan in this entire discourse. We want the rule of law, democracy and human rights to be the overarching issue in Kenya and in Africa. But we are looking at some of the issues that both sides are raising could be dialogued on. There could be a consensus reached. And I think it takes for us to convince the duty bearers who be, the people who have the muscle, the political actors, to sit and have a conversation before, unfortunately, we lose more lives. In our previous statement on 20th March, we stated after the loss of the Maseno student that one life has been lost, one life too many. We cannot be okay with 2 lives being lost in the second protest. We do not know the outcome of today, but indeed, lives are being lost. And we have not even accounted for the number of people with grievous injuries. So really, we really need to arrest the situation now before it spirals into something that we cannot contain. And we have seen that happen in our country. Another thing that we have seen in our country is that whereas we are a peaceful, loving nation, there are underbelly issues that we have yet to resolve. And I think even if you look at the TJRC report, if you look at the Waki report, the Ranzali report, there are various issues that were brought out. And we have really tried, and I think even the mandate of NCIC was to bridge cohesion and integration within our community. So we have been making strides toward building a unified Kenya, but we are not there yet. So why unearth certain issues that could potentially rip and draw back on the gains that we have made to unify this country?
Why unearth them, but is what you're asking. But perhaps should we consider, because you talk about mediation, right? You talk in your statement, you talk about the involvement of religious leaders and other various other stakeholders. But unless they are conclusively addressed, then don't we risk every election cycle, risk being constantly at the precipice? And I don't know what your view on that is, Joshua.
You know, when we reflect back where we've come from, especially for championing constitutional reform, and even the fight for the reintroduction for multi-party democracy in our country in the 90s, and which resulted to the repeal of the Section 2A of the old constitution. And you know, at that time, Kenyans thought that probably removing that section and allowing Kenyans to form parties, we also saw the struggles around you know, disintegration of political parties. So we've come a long way, I mean, in our democracy. But you ask a very important question that in every election, we seem not to have fixed our problems. That is true, because the 2010 Constitution is a product of the National Accord, the Kofi Annan mediation in 2008, where Kenyans having discussions around their new constitution needed to be put in place. And we got it gladly in 2010. And the first election under this constitution was in 2013. which gave us a means and a vehicle, which the contested presidential elections went up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, because Kenyans really believed, unlike in 2007, where there was no faith and loyalty in terms of any verdict that would have come from the former judiciary. So, but you see the results were upheld, and there was calmness, and like in 2007, just because of institutions that were functioning. But over time, as we went towards 2017, several institutions of governance were weakened in this country, and especially the constitutional commissions that were supposed to be the protectors of the implementation of the Constitution, either by being stiffed or undermined in terms of funding, or having appointments of compromised individuals to lead those commissions. So they never stood firm. And we've seen that as sliding back in not having those protectors of the Constitution to have stability in our democracy, because they would be the alternative voice outside the arms of government that we have. And then the other thing is that in 2022, which it was a closely contested election, and we saw also even the petition going to the Supreme Court, and there was a verdict to that effect, and there were politics around the outcome of the ruling by the Supreme Court, and we've seen that being advanced even in the protest, that probably the server was not really disclosed, but we know the issues around the server is an accountability issue, that elections needs to be credible, verifiable, and even information and documentation around election outcome needs to be accessible. But again, as we move forward, we are also seeing some degeneration in terms of utterances outside law by the political elite. I say this because we've seen also the media being attacked. And, Article 34 of the Constitution provides for press freedom. It's very express. That cannot be denied. But in this protest, we've seen journalists being, attacked. We've seen some of them arrested and even forced to delete their photographs. And this is away from the constitutional order that we gave ourselves in our country. And of course, this annoys. This even creates more tension. And we've also seen some politicians who have strategic positions in parliament saying that the media needs to be controlled. That is not the constitutional order and principles that we accorded ourselves when we are promulgating the 2010 Constitution. There must be press freedom, but again, that comes with the responsibility where issues around privacy, issues around fundamental data protection as provided by enabling laws of the or acts of parliament that supports the implementation of the Constitution needs to be put in place. But again, I think on the last bit is that there's freedom of conscience, religion, and beliefs, and even opinion, because that is what the Constitution talks about. And I think that is in Article 32, whereby every Kenyan, would make a choice. But what we saw in Kibra, the burning of a mosque, the burning of a church, that is not the responsibility of Kenyans that the Constitution gave us as a right, because there must be a right also to stop that, because there is a net effect of loss of property and also people living in disharmony and in disintegration. Yeah. And I think for the last bit is that every property, regardless of class, whether the rich, the middle level, the middle class, it has to be protected by the state. And the state has to be held accountable in terms of understanding that every property accounts. And there is no property that this is for Mama Mboga, or this is for the boda, and this is for the rich. Because what made the headlines? It is the property of a former president. But does it mean that was the only property that was destroyed on Monday this week? There are several properties, but why do they not get the prominence? And of course, the principles of the principles of governance and national values as provided for in Article 10 of our Constitution gives us as Kenyans as equal stakeholders, not shareholders, as the way some people are saying. And we have to be very categorical to even condemn that ideology of shareholding of this country. It is stakeholding in unity of Kenya's prosperity.
All right, not you brought up an interesting point. Not what did you call us? Not shareholders, but stakeholders. All right. And as I'm pulling up a tweet, the statement that was released yesterday by the Ministry of Interior, there's something you said in your statement, ICJ, and that is, we wish to remind the Inspector General of Police of his mandate under Article 245 of the Constitution of Kenya and the National Police Service Act to exercise independent command of the National Police Service and duty to all Kenyans under the Utumishi kwa Wote banner, and therefore cannot be seen and perceived as partisan in restoring law and order in the country. Why did you find it necessary to include this reminder to the Inspector General of Police?
I think it's important to remind the Inspector General of Police of his mandate, because the perception, particularly after Monday 27th, was that the police were not responsive to cries of help and also to the destruction of property that was happening in areas of the country. The specific focus was Northlands, because you could see destruction. People had time to cut trees, erect temporary houses, demarcate 50 by 100 properties, steal hundreds of cattle, sheep, and all that was happening over a period of 7 to 6 hours. So really, why weren't they there? But also looking back and looking into the Kibra situation, there were distress calls that were made, particularly when the church and the mosque were burned.